Welcome to the Meetup, folks. This is Samsung Internet Progressive Web Apps Meetup. We have moved to a virtual format, so we really appreciate all of your staying with us and dialing in, so to speak, for today's thing. As I said, we had hoped to see you all at our Samsung KX venue near King's Cross. Obviously, world events didn't allow for that, so we're trialing out some new technology, or new to us in terms of running some open meetups, running this as a virtual meetup on Zoom. I should first of all thank our partners over at PWA London Meetup for helping us to get the sign-up page online, helping us to promote the change when we change from an offline to, or from a physical to an online meetup. Really appreciate that. I wanted to also highlight the fact that this event runs under the Samsung Internet Code of Conduct, which I've added a link to in the open chat. It's Samsung Internet, Samsung Create, actually, Code of Conduct. It's a code of conduct that we created for our Samsung Create event that we ran in San Jose. If you have any issue that you want to report, please go ahead and either send a private message in the Zoom chat to myself or to Laura, who are Samsung employees here today. Other housekeeping things. What we're going to do, the format today is I'm going to hand over to Laura, and then Laura and Kevin are going to give a talk and share some slides about progressive web apps. And then we're going to move on to John Denton from Goodboy Digital, which is a company that we had the good fortune to be able to do a little bit of work with a couple of years ago on an exciting project, a VR Doctor Who game. And I'm really happy that John agreed to come and join us to talk about what their current thoughts are about progressive web apps. So that's going to be the format, and then we're going to go to a Q&A session. The Q&A will be moderated through the chat, so if you want to ask a question, you could either write it into the chat, write it directly to me in the chat, or I will read it out, or you can say, I want to ask a question, and then I'll unmute you and you can ask a question directly. So we're kind of experimenting with the format, so please bear with me if things don't seem very organized. But hopefully we'll all have a good time at any rate. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand it over to Laura to take it from here. So take it away, Laura.
Hi, everybody. So first of all, thanks for joining us. This is our very first meetup online. So I will definitely be really happy if you can send us feedback after. The format is super open. The idea is to do these more than once, and take this as an opportunity to also engage with different parts of the world, right? With different kind of communities. Yeah, so we're gonna have some discussions around PWA. We're gonna show you some cool stuff around PWA and technology. So again, please feel free to send us feedback. This is really important. The idea is to do these in different formats, options. So yeah, let us know, what do you think? And yeah, let me introduce Kevin. How are you, Kevin?
I'm Kevin, good. How are you?
Yeah, so we are part of Samsung advocacy team. Actually, Kevin is from?
Sorry, I'm from Switzerland.
Yes, we are a really international team. So thanks a lot, everybody that is at home. Stay safe and healthy. And let's take advantage of this and learn something about PWAs. So I'm gonna share my screen and we're gonna introduce you the talk of today, but I didn't want to do just a talk, because we are not doing a conference, we're not doing something live. This is a little bit different. So I will open a space, first of all, to discuss. Second, to see what's going on, right, with PWAs and technology. And yes, at the end, we're gonna have questions. So yeah, let's start with this. First of all, we are part of Samsung Internet Developer Advocacy Team. Feel free to follow us on social media as usual. We have to do, yeah. Yeah, developer advocacy, you know, we should share our social media. But first of all, I would like to explain what is a PWA. I think there are a few concepts around, and as developers, we are like, okay, should I use a PWA? But what's the difference between doing other platform or just use a native app? What do you think?
Yeah. So I think PWAs are great to basically have your apps available to everyone in the world very easily. So they're progressive, they're fast, they can be available offline. You can have amazing icons, and it's mostly cross-platform. So basically, you have only one code base, and that's make it very easy to develop.
Exactly. And something that I really like to say when somebody told me about PWAs is basically have the experience kind of a native app, but into the browser. So I'm not doing any native code that sometimes it can be harder or it takes longer or something like that. If you're a web developer, sometimes you are like, should I build a native app or not?
Yeah.
You know, or how we can have this approach to give the users a better experience using just web technologies. So basically, we are able to build app that feels like a native app, but just using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So those are some features that we can say about progressive web apps. So we're gonna talk like how we can actually do a PWA fast or offline. What about the icon? It's like, should we really have an icon? Is that the difference between just a web app that is not progressive web app? So let's see how it goes. One of the things that we like to say about PWA is like, why now? Why everybody's talking about PWAs and not before? Because I think this concept was, I think my friend Steve Jobs bring this concept about a few years ago, right? And talk about these native apps, kind of web apps, but the concept was so long ago. And right now, we kind of have a similar approach than a native app. So the main difference is that before, browsers didn't have the same technology, right? So right now, a lot of browsers, including Samsung Internet, has better approach to hardware. So we can have progressive web apps, even other technologies like WebXR, fingerprints, right? And security. So that's one of the main advantages, like why we are using PWAs now. And then one of the other things as developers is like, what do we need to build a PWA? It's like we need different types of code, or that this can be a little bit confusing, right? So what's the difference between just a normal app, then a PWA, or even a native app? So this is something that I would like to share with you. And again, if you have a different point of view as community or something like that, please feel free to share. This is the technical approach, right? What does it mean to build a PWA? So I would like to say that we need HTTPS, right? A manifest file, and a service worker. Okay, so we're going through each of it. And first of all, right now you're able to build a PWA easier because, again, if you have security around your app. Besides building trust into your users, you are going to be able to use other features. If you use HTTPS, you're going to be able to use service workers. So if you never built a PWA before, your very first step is to have HTTPS, right? Other thing is that actually, if somebody is not able to see anything or something like that, let us know. So we were talking about what does it mean to build a PWA for us developers, right? So we were talking about HTTPS. I'm gonna share anyway these slides later. Having a manifest file and then a service worker. And then we were talking that very first step for us is to build something around HTTPS. Currently, it's easier to have a certified, build something with SS certification. Before, I think it took more money or something like that.
Yeah, no, there is technologies like Let's Encrypt that lets you easily encrypt your website, and
yeah,
should be one of the reasons you should do it. Like, it's easy, it's convenient, and it's secure.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that we usually suggest. Very first step, build with HTTPS. And then let's go with manifest file, right? So the manifest file is one of the keys here. Basically, what is a manifest file is a JSON file, right? And this is our file that is gonna be key for us to actually bring this look like native app, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna be able to put the icon, right? What else? The different types of format, the URL that is going to open in our mobile browser, and it's gonna be the one that is gonna bring the ability to discover our app. We have a few stats around manifest files because we last year it was a really big year in terms of PWA for Samsung. We bring the chance to bring your PWA into the Galaxy Store in the US. So we find out really good stats about which are the PWAs out there, right? How developers are building PWAs, and which kind of stuff we're finding with manifest file, service workers, or even which types of PWA we have, right? Yeah, so after we have the manifest file, we have a service worker, right? This is the part that we would like to have more talks about this one, because service worker is basically the ability that is gonna give you the chance to have the offline experience, right? So we're gonna be able to control browser requests, catch different files, right? And there are even different techniques to build a service worker. Even though if you're not gonna build a service worker from scratch, you have right now tools that are gonna be, that basically is gonna make your life easier as a developer to have a service worker. I'm gonna show you a few ones after, right? So one of the things that we want to do after this session is, if you have any topics or suggestions that you would like to discuss in future online meetups, please let us know. One definitely is going to be service worker. I think this is the hardest part for a developer, right? So, but how does it look like? If you never built a PWA before, we build a collab step-by-step one. So we, one of the demos that we built is called Pigments. So what is Pigment?
So basically, Pigment is an example app that we did, which shows your color and show you the RGB code, the HSL code, and of the color you choose, basically. And we made it as a PWA. So if you go on the URL there, you can install it on Samsung Internet and have it on your phone as a PWA. And yeah, so how does it work?
Yeah, so basically what we did is we create Pigment, and besides being a PWA, we use a framework that we were building called One UI to make it look great, first of all, right? So those are tools that we are building basically to help you have a better experience. We're gonna share the URLs later so you can see what is One UI and actually even the collab. And with Pigment, what we're trying to do is to have the chance to use our app offline, okay? So if you see the screen right now, what you see is just a URL, right? So this is the first approach. If you didn't have, if you don't have a PWA installed before, so this is the first thing that you're gonna see, right? And then if you open a PWA for the first time in your browser, in this case, this is in Samsung Internet Browser, you're gonna see an icon there, as you can see in the screen. That means that you're able to install your app. And then there goes the difference. So it doesn't mean like it's just a shortcut or something like that. It's the same that I have an icon on your home screen or in your desktop, or what's the difference?
So it's way more different. So basically what it's gonna do is it's actually creating an APK on your phone, which is going to be installed as a proper app. So it's an app that's going to be installed. And then the app, you can also run it like any usual app on you from your home screen, have it on your home screen, whatever you want. And yeah.
Exactly. So once that you see install, here is the trick. You're gonna be able to see your app installed already, right? And then even you're gonna be able to see some stats like a native app, like how much battery you're using, mobile data, and things similar to a native app. So this property is called Web APK, right? And then one of the other things that I like to show you is, okay, so this sounds really great. Should I start learning from scratch, or which are the tools that I have to use, or actually how can I build a service worker or something like that? In our collab, what we explain is how to build step-by-step a PWA. And one of the tools that we are using is PWA Builder. So what I want to show you is I'm gonna share my screen, my full screen. Please let me know if you're not able to see my browser or something like that. So here I have the very first step of Pigment, right? This is the one that you're gonna see in our collab. As you can see, it's really awful because we're not using any framework as One UI to make it look great. It's not a PWA. I'm not able to see the icon here. So you can do this even with your app. So let's see how we can go easily and check what do we need to build a PWA. So basically I'm gonna copy the URL, and this side is PWA Builder. It's a really great tool made by Microsoft. I think it's Microsoft people around there, like, hi. And so what I'm gonna do is just copy and paste the URL here. If I press start.
So basically what it's gonna do is gonna take the URL that we gave, and it's gonna analyze it and check whether it fits or not the needs to be a PWA. So it's gonna check all of the boxes you can see here on the screen. The manifest, if the manifest is properly configured, if the properties are defined or not, We also have one about the service worker you were talking about, Laura, before.
Yeah. So basically, as you can see, we just have HTTPS cover, nothing else, right? We also been discussing that we need a manifest file. So you can easily go here and actually you can input some of the values of the manifest file, right? And then you can, once you put done, it's gonna generate an automatic manifest file, right? You can do the same thing with the service worker. Again, we're gonna talk about service workers probably in another session, but I just want to show you here that if you have the chance to choose which type of service worker, and you can export this code and then just add it into your app. And then once that you complete step by step, you can always go back here, copy your URL, even if you can have a score, right? To see if actually you have everything that you need into, so you can complete building a PWA. What am I showing you these? First of all, because it's pretty simple. We can start having a PWA easily. Of course, there are different types of techniques, right? Like which kind of stuff should I choose to make it offline? Or what else? Which files should I choose to put it offline? Or how my icon should look like?
Yeah, let's say we have assets, we maybe want to keep them and have them on the phone and just get them whenever we need. So it's all about having or not, storing or not files on the phone.
Exactly. And besides that, also when we create our manifest file, we have a few different things that we have to keep in mind. There are a few different values. Actually, we have, I invite you to check our blog post about which values you should consider to build your manifest file, right? Which are mandatory. Should we actually put an icon? And at the end, what you need to do is check into the different browsers. Why? Because basically, we are building standards and checking so developers can make sure that it's gonna not be like a huge effort for you to build a PWA and have different types in different browsers, first of all. And also that's why we really suggest to take a look into standards, right? To MDN. And at the end, you can have, even if you don't have icons or something like that, you can check here and test the different properties of your icon, like the background color, if it's gonna be the orientation or things like that. So if you do the step by step, again, please let us know if you do our code lab to see how it goes. And you can do the same thing not only with Pigment, also with every web app. Let's go back to the slides. Alrighty, so we've been talking about PWAs and actually the ability to bring your PWA into the Galaxy store, right? So besides these, we were doing a little bit of research about the current status of the PWAs that the community is building and why and which kind of stuff we were finding. So I think, Kevin, you were doing a lot of research around.
So I've been doing some statistics and looking around on PWAs around, and most of the PWAs that we have out here are either experiences done by indie developers, which is basically to make it easier for people to access and have their tools online. We also saw that a lot of meeting and application, like for example Tinder, were using it. Also a lot of news websites were using it. we can see the use cases where the web is not controlled by anyone. So you can basically build your own platform, and people can download it from your own platform, and so then you're not controlled by anyone on what you're publishing. And so that's one of the good things that we've seen from PBS that people are building.
Yeah, so we are looking for PWAs. First of all, to see what's your experience. Like in this case, John is gonna talk later about gaming and PWAs, and also why did you choose to build a PWA, right? Because as developers, we usually think to do something that is cross-platform and improve reaching more users and something like that. But in the end, users are still having this time like, what is a PWA? They usually doesn't know what is the concept, right? They just want to be able to have a really good experience in the browser. So I'm not gonna explain my mom, hey, that's a PWA, that's a native app, right? My mom just wants to open something, have a really good performance, right?
Just make the most of it.
Yeah, make the most of internet. So that's before we have a special guest today. But before we go with our special guest, something that I want to keep in mind with you is, even though currently we are living exciting times to see what's going to happen in a few months later or next years with PWA, I think like our users deserves a really good experience into the browser. So a good user probably wants to make the most of their app. So what does it mean? Have a really good performance.
Good preferences, good experience. I mean, having a good transition between devices also, and everything that's around that.
Yeah, so keep in mind that with just small steps, you can already improve the experience into the browser. So with this saying, we have a really special guest today. Actually, we want to introduce you one of the new technologies that Samsung is having. Let's talk about foldables and PWAs and the browser. So what's going on? Of course, we've been talking to build a PWA, we need a service worker, HTTPS, right? And the manifest file. But let's also keep in mind that we are also trying to build a really good experience for people. So that's it means that we have to make a responsive website, right? And right now we have a really new approach that is the foldable. So let me welcome the really new guest that we have here.
There it is.
Yes, there we go.
Hello, just making a surprise appearance and making sure that the PWA logo is properly used, which I had no.
What do you think?
It's properly used.
Okay.
I had no doubt.
We did it.
Kind of like to Laura's point, the whole concept of foldable devices, like the one that we have here, is interesting, and how we can combine PWAs with it is also quite interesting indeed, because there's this, there's this whole subject about how the underlying web technologies, and maybe Laura, if you can just share it, how the underlying web technologies are taking advantage of all these new devices and new capabilities. And some of the things that I think are quite exciting, and some of the new features that are coming to the web platform, things like CSS media queries that allow you to identify if there's any preference for reduced data, if there's any preference for different themes that are going on the operating system, such like a dark theme, a light theme. All these things in the end are going to be adapting. And of course, if we're talking about foldable devices, then there's currently a couple of media queries that are being proposed by our friends at Microsoft. They're used to pretty much distinguish where is the fold, where the device is folding, and we actually hope to be able to adapt the content and the UI of the application itself. Now, we are currently working as well with some friends at Intel at being able to identify what is the fold of the device itself, because we can see a lot of very interesting use cases. If you have the device, for example, and here we can see the app that Laura was speaking before.
Yeah,
Pigment,
let's see
maybe,
if, yeah, there.
But what if I start closing this device, and then instead of having the UI being split by, by the fold, if we can actually make sure that we are putting the color on one side and the content on the other side. So all these type of things are quite interesting. They're things that we are currently looking for your feedback, and if you as web developers and CSS developers are interested in maybe getting your voice heard, what we would like to pretty much know, what do you think would make your life easier when developing for devices like the Galaxy Fold, like the Motorola Razr, like the Galaxy Flip, like the Huawei Mate X. So it's definitely technology that is coming. It's definitely something that plays very well with progressive web apps, and we're keen on hearing your comments and suggestions. So feel free to hit us up.
Yes, hopefully when we are back in Samsung KX, also we are hoping to show you the devices and actually work with you to have some feedback, test your app into our device, right, and see how it goes. Because we have different approaches now. Besides have the chance to fold, we can do even more than one screen and divide the screen here if I open another browser. So like, I don't know if you're able to see here, I have two pigments because pigment is great. But there are a lot of things to discuss here. Same with general concepts with PWAs. One of the feedback that I receive is what happened when it's not just a single page application, or if I have a different type of architecture in terms of building a service worker. So all this kind of stuff we want to hear about, and actually see what we can do to actually build better tools, or even suggest any other experience around progressive web apps.
Also, maybe just adding there, we're keeping an eye as well on upcoming projects like web capabilities, the famous UGU, just making sure that everything complies, hopefully with privacy, but just be sure that PWAs are getting more and more powerful. The web platform in general is getting more and more powerful, and this will inevitably make sure that the type of experiences that we are seeing on native are type of experiences that we are going to start seeing more and more on web platforms. So it's definitely exciting times to be alive.
Yes, and be safe and healthy at home.
Wash your hands.
Wash your
20
hands.
seconds.
Yeah. So what if I ask you as a developer, should I build a PWA or not? Why would
just go for it.
Go
just
for
go
it.
for it.
Diego?
I think there's a valid reason to build PWAs. Definitely, if you are aiming to build something that is lighter, that has wider reach, it's definitely a very valid option. I mean, everything needs to be, analyzed, but I don't see a reason why not to go for it.
Yeah, and one thing that we would like to mention also is not like native versus PWAs. Also, they both can live together. You also bring the user a different platform, because at the end, web, something that is really nice about the web is like everybody can go and reach your website easily. Like if you're a mobile developer, you probably struggle with the chance to, like, my users are going to download my app, or what can I do to actually improve retention or things like that. So at the end, it's a different platform that is open to everybody, and you actually can be can do a better user experience. So yeah. Okay, so we have a few resources for you. First of all, again, we would like to hear you some topics that you would like to discuss, or we can even do office hours. That's the idea, to have different types of tutorials here. And one of the things that we would like to share is our collab, right? If you never built a PWA before or something like that, we have a glitch. So you're going to be able to build the app that we were showing you before, Pigment, and you're going to be able to test around and things like that. Follow us on social media, Samsung Internet, because we are writing a lot of posts around this. Also, we are trying to create different types of media. Diego, where are you? I don't know. I just didn't want to leave you behind.
I'm here.
Yeah. So besides that, we're actually trying to generate more videos or things like that. So pay attention to our social media. Also, we were talking about standards before. If you want to check what is going on behind the creation of the manifest file, which are the new things that the standards are working around, I really suggest to take a look into the W3C. Yeah, and then I have a suggestion about a book that I really like, Progressive Web Apps, a book of art. So please feel free to suggest any other resources if you have. That's it. So yes, I think that, and that's it for today. Remember to send us feedback. And Dan.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So and now we can hear from John.
Yes.
Hello.
Thanks everybody. Go John.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Here's Laura. Okie dokie. So let me just get the sharing. Okay. Is that looking up and running?
That's good.
Cool. Okay. Well, yeah. First up, yeah. Thanks a lot to Dan and Laura for inviting me to speak today, and also, yeah, thanks a lot to Laura and Kevin and Diego there for that talk. It's going to make some of what I'm talking about a lot easier. So that's a really good start. So yeah, just to introduce myself, I'm John Denton. I'm the creative partner at Goodboy Digital. This isn't going to be strictly a tech talk. Very little tech, in fact. It's more just an overview into our experience with with mobile games, and particularly with PWAs, and why we believe that PWAs offer like this really amazing new opportunity in the mobile games sort of space. So just a very quick top level about the company. As a games focused business, we focus really on snackable kind of games. We're all about sort of small, sort of quick, hard-hitting kind of game experiences, and we always look for reach. Reach is one of the biggest things for us. So that's kind of really one of the big motivations that drives our kind of commitment to web tech, and obviously here PWAs. So yeah, just moving on. I think Laura kind of covered this. There's a fair bit of kind of sort of confusion and what a web, what is a progressive web app? What's it all about? And there's this article actually by Amberly Romo is a good sort of insight into that. This is like a 10-minute read, and it's just this dive into the kind of the depths of, in this case, the confusion about what is a web app, what constitutes it. And there's a lot in there. There's under HTTPS service workers, as we just heard about, and all of this. So basically, you know, it can feel overwhelming at times. But as Laura's just helped us see, it's not as crazy as all that. The actual, you know, the fundamentals of what you need to create a web app are you know, relatively straightforward once you sort of get your head around them. But for us, just sort of distill it right down. Web app for us is a means of deploying content so that it can be saved to your device and looks and behaves like an installed app. That for us is the kind of our core focus of, you know, what we want out of a progressive web app. And a big other aspect there is that it's offline. You know, it offers this offline experience. So, you know, we make mobile games, and obviously they're great, but, you know, you're downloading them every time you play them when you're playing a game in a browser. But, you know, this is an amazing thing that we can now use the PWA to take an experience and keep it on the device in an offline sort of manner. Again, the guys just talked about this. So progressive web apps so far at the moment. So, you know, if you look around, you'll see quite a lot of, you know, kind of information driven content, sort of social and information. So you've got things, you know, like, you know, Uber, Trivago, you've got Twitter have got a kind of PWA, there's Tinder are using it, and then news things, Forbes and Pinterest as well. So, you know, there's quite a lot of examples. But on the whole, the kind of content out there is, it's quite similar to the early days of, you know, the smartphone sort of era. So, you know, when smartphones came along and Flash was killed, there was this sort of period on the internet where everything did go a little bit dry. It was quite a lot of information out there. But, you know, that isn't, you know, a kind of a facet of progressive web apps. It's just, that's where they're being picked up first. You know, it's like the first steps to using a PWA are probably to just take some fairly, you know, straightforward content and see how you can get that packaged and deployed. But you can do much more with that. So just quickly to sort of move into, well, games and mobile web, and then moving into PWA. So these are sort of numbers and things we all kind of see quite a lot of. So this is the global games market. So this is mobile and console. So this sort of covers everything. And then, you know, the games market itself is huge now. You know, you're talking about the games industry is bigger than film and music combined. So it's a vast market. It's obviously very attractive to be part of it. And then you can see here, the mobile part of it is massive. And this is 2019. You know, it will continue to sort of take more and more share of the market. So, you know, mobile is pretty much half of the games market. And then, yeah, so on mobile platforms, games themselves, you know, they're at least a quarter of the actual use and content on mobile. So, yeah, obviously it's an appealing thing to get into the mobile game space. And at the moment, there are kind of two routes to doing that. You can basically either go through the browser, and, you know, so we've got, well, the browser on Android or iOS. And then likewise, the other option is to go through the web stores in both of those platforms. So, you know, that's kind of your two options. You can hit the browser, go direct, you know, that way, or you could make an app. And presently, that has tended to mean making an app means to go native. So, you know, the main pros of native are access to the GPU, CPU. You get a lot of performance. So, you know, you can do more native than you can with mobile web, but, you know, that's something that can be worked around through your game making decisions. Customer familiarity in the stores, you know, the play in the app stores. People know them. People know where to go and get games. They know they're there. They know that's where they can find them. So familiarity is huge. Tools is massive as well for native, and it's something that we are working on internally for ourselves, tooling. But it's probably one of the biggest standouts in favor of native. If you're an indie game dev, particularly, is tools. You know, you can just grab Unity, you can use Unreal Engine, and you've got like an IDE to start actually creating, which is obviously a big bonus. And native was the only way to get into the app stores for a while. You know, if you wanted to make a game and deliver it, you had to make a native app. Not so much now. There's other options, part of which relates to this. Also, there's other things like Cordova. You can package web content now. But yeah, the PWA will come into play. And then, yeah, you've got access to subscription services. Web-based, so Reach. Reach is the big one. For us, it's by orders of magnitude the biggest draw of web for making games. So discoverability, shareability, you know, you can make a game and you can tweet it, you can talk about it, you can post it on social, and your audience can see that link and go, I'm in the game, there I am, that's it. That link can be straight into the game. No barriers. You know, that's the thing for us. One code base, you know, when you're developing mobile web, you are making, if it's a game, you know, you're making your game will run, you know, obviously you've got to do your QA and make sure you've done all your homework and tested everything, but your game will work on iOS, on Android, it'll work on every device, again, you know, making sure you've optimized and done what you need to do, but, you know, your one game can get everywhere. Frictionless play. This is again in relation to you know, playing through a browser-based thing. You don't need to worry about some of the component, you know, some of the aspects of app stores like passwords, you know, logging in and the rest of it, which for others grown-ups is fine, but you know, when you're making games where you want to be able to get your content to kids, it's also an aspect that having no friction, no, you know, the kid needing to, you know, pester mum or dad to get in the app store. That's a really great thing, having that zero barrier to entry. And yeah, packaging with things like Cordova, and again, as we'll see, using PWAs, mean that we can actually reach the app stores now as well. And then the final thing that we find a really great sort of benefit is the ease of update. So when you're using a web-based method of creating your game content, you can do updates. So you can do, you know, new content being fed into the games, new you know, environments and packs and expansions or brand sponsorships. You can do all of this stuff and basically deliver it to your game using, you know, the web architecture. So yeah, again, it means that, you know, if you do an update to your game, you want to put some new content into it, you don't necessarily, well, you don't have to go through an app resubmission through an app store. So that's another one of those sort of you know, big wins. So yeah, mention some of the, you know, the uses of PWA as it is now. Lots of, you know, kind of information content, but you know, we are seeing games. There is stuff out there. You know, it's at the simpler end at the moment, the stuff we're seeing, but there's definitely a lot of potential. So yeah, just quickly, we want to sort of just bring up, like, as a sort of backdrop, you know, what we've been doing with HTML, you know, technology in the browser. So, you know, for us, using web tech to make really rich, sort of engaging, deep kind of game content, you know, that's something we've been focusing on for years. But I think, you know, the fact is that, you know, using, you know, things like WebGL technology means that, you know, we can make perhaps not you know, Fortnite or Call of Duty, but we can make some really, really kind of pretty awesome looking web game content. And, you know, all of those examples there, every one of those could be deployed as a PWA, and one of them, which we'll get to, already is. So when we're thinking about PWAs, basically our methodologies, we're thinking a mobile approach. So things like file size, you know, that becomes massively important. So, you know, we'll often hear from other partners who we work with about, you know, like almost, they refer to it as like a 3-second rule. You know, if your audience hasn't got something happening within 3 seconds of instigating the download, you know, they see these huge sort of drops in kind of engagement and, you know, users actually making it to the game. So we do a lot to really optimize and focus on exactly how we bring in our content, how we stream it, how we, you know, sort of feed it in, drip feed it to the user. Gameplay itself, I think it's worth sort of noting that, you know, we, for this kind of, you know, the web approach, focused, simple gameplay, I think is quite important. You know, whilst you can make really massive experiences, I think we find, you know, the kind of more sort of, you know, hyper casual, mid-core approach to game styles, I think is a good fit for PWA. Monetization, well, the good news obviously is you can. For PWA and for mobile web monetization, we see the better, more successful route being ad based. So whether it's kind of interstitial ads or reward ads, you know, giving people a continue or whatever by kind of watching a bit of ad content, we see that works really well. Over in-app purchases, mainly because mobile web and IAP is not great. I think there are solutions out there, but they tend to be quite convoluted, whereas being able to integrate advertising is pretty straightforward. And then retention, this is possibly true of a lot of types of game genres, you know, hyper casual and mid-core. You know, again, retention, we look at driving that through good metagame systems, so having little metagame loops that keep people in your game. Appointment mechanics are also really useful things, so having people come back to your game on say like a daily streak, so they get rewards for coming back day after day, content updates. And you know, the great thing about all of these, you know, all of these kind of approaches is that, you know, they're all really super valid for the mobile kind of web gaming space. You know, all of these things are really successful tools to sort of engage and retain your audience. So the next thing is like a quick example of PWA that we kind of put together. I'll share the link for later. So this was kind of our first investigation into, yeah, sort of using PWA to actually take maybe a slightly more visually involved piece of work, you know, that was using WebGL and that kind of technology, and just kind of kicking the tires on it, really. A quick, I guess, apology, as it were. So this example is running on iOS, which is for the reason that iOS is less advanced, basically, for PWA. So the reason we did it this way was to actually test it in its most hostile environment. In actual fact, this example works, of course, on Android too, but there's a lot less to show, basically, because it works much more seamlessly. So here we've got our browser game. There's our URL. We've got a prompt to say, right, here's how you have to do it on iOS. You've got to fiddle about a bit. You know, you need to add it to home screen. Then we've got our app icon name. And then there it is on our iOS device. So now we just go ahead and turn off all of our network connections, open it up, and then now you can see it has become an app. Basically, it's an app. It's playing offline. There it is. There's our content. Again, a little weird quirk of iOS, and it's not quite matureness with PWA, was that notification about being offline. But you know, it doesn't stop it from working. You just have to say okay. Yeah, there it is. That's you know, that was our kind of test case, PWA. So there you go. There it is, working it seamlessly in a Android. Like I say, the experience there for Android is really streamlined. I think Laura showed before. Basically, what you'd get is the prompt that just says, "Do you want to install this as an app?" You know, effectively as an app, and you install it, and that's it. Basically, you've then got it. It's on your home screen. It's got all of those kind of perks of behaving like an app, and it's, yeah, you know, you start it and it doesn't tell you that you're offline either. It just gets on with it. So yeah, the future, I guess, just a few thoughts now on you know, what we think could be next up for good application of PWA in gaming. So one of them, the match made in heaven, is kind of, you know, we see it certainly, and that match for me is these guys, which of course are hyper casual games. So hyper casual, if you haven't heard of the term, I mean, you will, I'm sure, have seen hyper casual games. You know, things like Helix Jump. There are many examples, in fact. But hyper casual, essentially, you know, the tenets of hyper casual are satisfying, simple mechanics, visuals. You know, hyper casual, they're all about the toy. They're not big, expansive games. They're just, here's a thing to do. It's satisfying. Do it. They work on a real volume ecosystem driven by rapid prototyping. So it's a very, you know, it's quite a ruthless world, but it's very much survival of the fittest. Games are prototyped, launched, delivered, and the ones that don't get, you know, good cost per install, because it's the world of installing over there at the moment. The ones that don't do well are kind of sort of canned, basically. But the key point is it's driven by volume. In terms of how it's, you know, gets audiences, user acquisition, cross promotion. So that is how hyper casual games exist. They kind of, if you speak to hyper casual game makers, they almost don't care about the App Store. They really, they're in the App Store because that's where you need to be. That's where you put games, but they don't care about the App Store in terms of things like, normally as a games maker, you desperately want the feature in the Play Store or the App Store. Hyper casual, they're not really bothered. Their system is all internal. The games promote the games. It's a very internalized ecosystem, and monetization driven by ads, not IAP. Again, hyper casual games, you'll probably see, if they have IAP, it will be, you pay £3 to turn off adverts. That's their IAP. But primarily, they are driven by ads, reward ads, interstitial ads. But you know, that's how they make their money. And this is just a very quick snapshot of that. So this is ads and media within hyper casual games. So this was just last year. So it went from adverts in hyper casual being mainly for IAP games, as in adverts for other mid-core games, and then hyper casual games for tiny. And now it's completely switched around, and it's even way beyond this now. So advertising in hyper casual now is basically hyper casual games advertise hyper casual games, whether it's their own publishers doing their own adverts. So you'll see, if you look at Voodoo Games, they'll have loads of stuff where it's like on the home screen there'll be a video showing another game, and you'll be in this snake eating its tail circle of just games, all feeding themselves. But all of that is like really, really kind of super aligned with everything that mobile web games and, you know, the PWA kind of ability to keep games. It's all completely aligned there. And I think this is going to be something we'll see more and more of. Because like I say, hyper-casual, they have no real allegiance to app stores. They don't get that much out of what app stores can offer. They're there because currently that's, you know, that's where the audience is. So yeah, I think that's going to be an interesting one to see play out. Next thing, just wanted to quickly talk about is the TWA. So PWAs have now got TWAs, and the A in TWA doesn't mean app, just to keep things good and confusing. So yeah, we've now got the trusted web activity. So this is essentially, it's just a kind of a little step further you can take your PWA. So it's pretty new. I've not really seen any game examples yet. Obviously, we'll go ahead and make one ourselves to sort of see how it works and how it can work. But yeah, basically, this is a kind of I think sort of similar to the Galaxy Store in that basically you can take your PWA and deliver it to the Google Play Store. So it's basically just further packaging the PWA so that it can exist in the Play Store, which again, you know, we're all about reach. So if there's a technology that means we're now covering the browser, we've got a PWA to keep it offline, and then we can do a little bit more and stick it in the App Store too, then, you know, it seems like a kind of no-brainer to sort of just cover all of these markets, which we can do now using mobile and PWA kind of tech and game making approach. So yeah, the last sort of thing we've been looking at, we thought might be worth just a little bit of a sort of a think about, is PWA and the web view. So this is something that we're literally just testing out at the moment. So PWA, one of its big things, the manifest and the ability to offline, you know, content, that's really, really interesting. So we recently did this game and a whole bunch of other games with from McDonald's in Australia. So this game was basically, it's like a completely very hyper casual derived mechanic, and you're playing this little hyper casual game, going along trying to sort of make your way through all of these obstacle courses. You're picking up tokens, and basically this experience is all contained in the McDonald's native app. So it's basically a web view in the app, and then we just serve our game into this web view. And so users are basically having this really rich, engaging experience within the McDonald's app, which, you know, the native app is, you know, it's very, very dry. It's like wallets for your offers, it's store finders, it's all that kind of thing. But now they're being able to expand the app's kind of value and, you know, its ability to deliver really engaging content by effectively packaging this content and putting it into, you know, a web view. And then just, yeah, the extension we're looking at is using PWA methodology now to keep that manifest and essentially attach it to the web view that is delivered, you know, into the app. So it means, you know, these big corporate app owners who, you know, maybe would shy away from doing this kind of content normally, or they'd perhaps feel like they have to do it in a a native app. So McDonald's have done things like that, where they have native apps to do a game kind of thing. But now we're opening that up to them so that basically they've got the power to sort of like have this kind of experience. And then using PWA means that you get all of that seamlessness, so that once a player's played this game one time in their app, they can then load up the app, come back to it, jump into this game, and yeah, basically they're good to go. You know, they've got this seamless native-like experience. So yeah, that's my quick run through PWAs in gaming. Pros: discoverability, shareability. It's just, you know, that reach, that ability to get people straight away is amazing. App Store independent. I think that's a really useful thing. You know, app stores are great. They do have their place. They're really useful for a lot of things, but sometimes marketing, particularly, you know, brands don't always want to make and build an app and promote an app, you know, so the web sort of aspect there is great. And with PWA, you can then keep it. So you get a sort of win-win. Single code base for us, I mean, that's an amazing thing, that you can make this one kind of piece of web content. It works on iOS, it works on Android. We can reach app stores, you know, we can go into other apps, you know, that's a massive thing. And yeah, content updates without any need for resubmission to stores. Perhaps negatives: Android centric. I mean, it kind of, in this discussion, I think that's probably not a con, because it's Android we're talking about here. But you know, obviously, if you're making a game, you want to get your whole audience, and you can. You know, iOS works. It's a bit more fiddly, a bit more clunky, but you know, I don't think it's insurmountable. It does like the brute force of native, but again, you know, we're not all trying to make Fortnite, and for it, I think, you know, any hyper casual game I would stand by could be a PWA. You know, there's no hyper casual game I've played that I don't think we could recreate perfectly with web tech. There are monetization questions, but again, you know, if you go the right route, you know, you choose a more ad-centric monetization, you're kind of well covered. And the final con is it's new. You know, people don't yet know about this. They don't yet know that this is a thing. But again, you know, I don't think that's a sufficient con to really put people off. So yeah, PWAs for the win. Heck yeah. So yeah, cheers. Thanks for having me. Thanks Dan and Laura and all the guys. Yeah, it's been good to talk. I'll make this available after the event, and yeah, if you want to reach out, you can get me on my email or goodboydigital.com. That's where you can get in touch with us. And if there's any tech questions anyone has, we've got, you know, our room full of boffins and tech people who I am sure will be happy to answer your more technical concerns and questions.
Well, thank you, John. That's great. You know, I think I'm going to take the screen back over, just not to present anything more, but just to show a couple of web pages. Let's see here. What have I got? Go. Yes. Right. So, can people see that?
Yep.
I hope they can. Okay. So anyway, just to bumper that, and before we get into Q&A, just to remind people, Samsung Internet, at Samsung Internet Developer Advocacy Group, we have our developer hub, which you can reach on samsunginter.net, which is our cutesy URL. Here you can read all of our articles. These are mirrored from our Medium blog. We also have information about the team, some links off to support and to demos and things like that, and some documentation as well. I just should mention specifically about documentation. We are a partner with, along with Microsoft and Google and a couple of other organizations, Boku being one of them, with Mozilla on the MDN WebDocs website. So I actually sit on the advisory board of MDN. And the purpose of that is to ensure that we make MDN a really good kind of repository and a place where people can get information about web application development. Currently, there's some information here about progressive web apps. Laura and I are actually working with the people at MDN to update this, and we'd certainly be happy to get your feedback. But what we hope to do is to update this fairly, because it's a little bit out of date. For instance, it doesn't mention things about Web APK, which is a fairly new thing as of last year. I would also just like to mention that, like, I've been working on this stuff around progressive web apps for a while now, and it's really exciting to see so much happening in this space. And that the whole point of PWAs is that they're supposed to be, cross-platform, cross-browser, right? So it's actually great to see PWAs working on iOS. I think that's important for the ecosystem. We like to think that we provide a better experience, better than iOS, obviously, but also better than Chrome, even because we actually have the install button and stuff like that that Chrome doesn't have. At any rate, I'm going to open it up to Q&A now. So if people want to join in on the chat or to just raise their hand and let me know, and I'm going to stop sharing so I can see the chat again. Okay, so does anybody have a question they'd like to ask myself, John, Laura, Kevin, or Diego?
Yeah, I mean, even besides questions, if you are already working in a PWA and you have something in particular that you want to share, or any other topic that you would like us to discuss later, we're thinking about different options and formats about this type of online meetups. So everything is more than welcome.
So one question from Rocky. Why offline page work most? Something about iOS. I'm not sure that we can really address that on today's call. But I think the question was about offline pages not working very well on iOS. Have you found that, or has your team found that to be an issue, John?
Not so much, but mainly because we've not tried to use it. I think, as I say, for us, the big, or one of the really big kind of standouts of PWA, and what's made it really exciting for us is its ability to be offline. So I think things like I guess here the example like Pinterest or a lot of the examples we looked at earlier. At the moment, there does seem to be a lot of PWAs that are kind of, I mean, not weirdly, but it's perhaps not making the most of them, that they're really focused on kind of news and things that are by nature online. They have to be online. Pinterest is a feed, news is a feed, so like all of those examples, Forbes, Twitter, all the rest of it. So yeah, obviously, if you are offline, you're not going to get much out of a news website. But yeah, for us, it's the ability to be offline that I think is what's of particular interest in the games field, because for us, we make these mobile game, browser games, and so we really focus on these tiny file sizes. So we've actually essentially got this product which is really, here's a game that you can get really quickly, like really, really fast. But the downside has always been you have to get it every time you want it. Whereas now with PWA, it's like, we've made this amazing experience. It's tiny, so you can have it in, a number of seconds, but also now you can keep it and it's yours. You want to get on a plane with it, you can. And, we're also developing ecosystems like that, you know, where we're downloading content into them, and again using this kind of technology to keep it offline. So I think for us, being offline is one of the really useful parts of PWA.
Another question came onto the chat here, and also about iOS. Obviously, we can't really say too much about iOS. iOS browser don't, you know, they are not maybe as forthcoming about their their upcoming features. I will say, however, in defense of iOS and iOS Safari, I mean, a lot of people thought they weren't going to launch Service Worker. They did launch Service Worker. A lot of people thought they weren't going to support Manifest. Well, they've started to support parts of the Manifest. There are many PWA features that iOS Safari does support. I think that they will be continuing to support more features. There's a bit of a philosophical issue in that some people in the Safari and WebKit communities aren't really bought into the notion of progressive web apps, but I don't really think that matters. In the end, it's more of a ideological issue. I think that the underlying technologies, mostly they should, or not mostly, all of them should be of the web, and they are of the web. And as those technologies permeate into other browsers, we haven't mentioned Mozilla, but Mozilla has, and Firefox obviously has been a big proponent of most of the technologies that we're talking about as well, and has been part of the discussions. So I think the cross-platform thing is something that we're pushing. We obviously think that our browser is one of the best places, if not the best place to for PWAs to be deployed. However, the whole point of PWAs is that they're cross-platform, and we're working in standards and in other industry bodies such as MDN and other kinds of things like that to make sure that we have a good cross-platform story around progressive web apps. Some people are asking about the Samsung store and PWAs. Laura, Diego, do you want to address this one?
So currently it's just only available in the US. The process is like, we're testing the process because currently it's just, you have to send an email. I think, Dan, you shared the article where we talk about how is the process to publish your PWA into the Galaxy Store. So, and then there is other question that how is the process to allow PWA in the Samsung Store in other countries? Again, right now it's just in the US, but the idea is to, first of all, try to see the advantages and check if actually there is a chance to open this to other countries. And that's why we are asking you your experience building a PWA, stats as Kevin were doing, right? To actually show that it's worth it to open this into a Galaxy Store. So yeah, that's the current situation right now.
Any other questions from the community, stuff people want to ask or raise, or issues or links you want to share?
Yeah, and another thing that I would like to mention in terms of different platforms and vendors is like, in a few months, the idea will be to have a PWA conf where we're going to invite other mentors or something like that. We're still checking how is the best approach to go with coronavirus, but the main idea is to actually give developers a guide about what's going on in different platforms, not only in Chrome, not only in Samsung Internet, also what's going on in desktop, or actually what is the best approach for us if we want to publish this into the store, or what does it mean to do a TWA, or does it worth it? So just keep our social media updated, because we probably want to share with you when we have this information. So
Yeah, I think that the desktop thing is really interesting too, because as we've been discussing when we've been going through the documentation plan for the MDN pages, the whole advent of progressive web apps on desktop is being pushed very heavily by Microsoft right now, and we're going to be hearing a lot more about that from them, I'm sure. Diego, you look like you want to say something.
No, it's just because I'm seeing a question here that says the Samsung browser used the same default install prompt as Google, and it's pretty much a question that says if I have a PWA tested on Chrome mobile, it should work fine on Samsung browser too. I wouldn't assume that. Basically, we are on a different engine than what the Chrome.
We're on a different version of the Chromium.
Yeah,
engine.
we're on a
Yeah,
we're on a
yeah,
different
yeah,
version
yeah.
of the engine. So I would always test on Samsung Internet. Also, not only because of new features that might be supported or different in our implementation, but also because, for example, there are things like I believe the on before install prompt, which is something that is still not in Samsung Internet, and we've gotten some questions from developers that are referring specifically to certain features like that one. Related to PWA. So I would always just test and make sure that that your PWA and your website work as you intended to in Samsung Internet, because basically we are among one of the most used browsers, and it makes sense to make sure.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. Also, I mean, we didn't really give you all the Samsung Internet spiel too much at the beginning but Samsung Internet Browser is available for any Android phone. We're not just on Samsung phones. So if you want to test Samsung Internet, if you want to test your website or your progressive web app on Samsung Internet, you can download it on any Android phone. Having said that, there are certain features, Web APK is one of them, that are only available if Samsung Internet is running on a Samsung phone. The reason Web APK is only available on Samsung phones is because we need to sign that APK, and we can sign it using the trust authority of our own application store on Samsung devices. I learned recently that the full screen API is also only available on Samsung phones, and that's because there are some issues with the way that our we want to be able to make sure that we are giving a good experience even when there's something like a hole punch for the camera that's in the top of our screen, or different approaches to incorporating the camera and other sensors into the top of the screen. So there are only certain phones where that API is available. So anyway, that's a very good example of why you might want to test on Samsung Internet and also test on Samsung phones if you can. And as far as trusted web activities goes, as I said in my blog post, which I left a link to, we try not to say TWA in the team because we think it's a little confusing between that and the term PWA. But trusted web activities themselves should be coming to a future version fairly quickly. I don't think they're coming in I don't think they're coming in this beta, the 11 point whatever beta, but they are going to be in the 12, I think. That's possible. Anyway, so watch this space. So we are, lots of good questions here about installation. We are always investigating new user experiences for PWA installation. As I said, we were one of the first browsers to put the install button in the URL bar. That's still a differentiator for us. There's also APIs which enable you to install directly from the application, which is something that I think is quite exciting. Diego, did you have anything else on that? Or Laura?
Just reaching for the phone.
Ah, okay.
Sorry.
Need your foldable. Okay. if you have other questions, feel free to leave them or to ask us on Twitter. We're more than happy to respond to those on Twitter. And we're planning on doing an office hours type event, probably on progressive web apps technologies, in a little bit earlier in the day, probably more during UK business hours on Friday of this week. So again, have a look on our Twitter or on our LinkedIn page, where we've also been announcing this stuff. Let me leave a link to that LinkedIn page as well, because we've been trying to use LinkedIn as well as a kind of a developer outreach. Tools to develop WebGL games. Any thoughts? John, do you have any ideas?
That is that's the real killer. I think, as I say, native, you've got loads and loads of tools, IDEs. Unity, that's the big one that jumps out. It's tricky. I think that's the most challenging part of developing games for mobile browsers at the moment is tooling is limited. As a company who sort of focus on that, we have built a lot of tools ourselves. Pixie.js is the rendering engine that we created internally, so it's open source. So if you want to at least have a look at Pixie.js, that's that'll give you a bit of a good start, at least in terms of getting rendering done. In terms of actual game engines, it's trickier. There's I've forgotten its name for the time being. What's it called? The WebGL one. Whatever. It will come to me in a minute. But yeah,
I think it's Phaser.
Oh, Phaser. Phaser used to use Pixie, actually. I don't know if he's still using it, but Phaser's, yeah, that's pretty good for doing, kind of simpler content. So it'll be good for doing like a, 2D stuff, platformers, that kind of thing. And keeps popping into my head. Give me one sec. But yeah, Phaser's cool for doing. Yeah, it'll get you started for sure. And
3JS was suggested, but yeah, 3JS is more like a toolkit as opposed to a.
Yeah, 3JS is it's kind of in a way it's a bit like Pixie. We made Pixie to be a 2D renderer. That's where it kind of began. Internally, we're now, those games you saw, they're all 3D, and they're using kind of the tools we've been built internally. Play Canvas, that was the one I was thinking of. So Play Canvas is an HTML5 game and visualization kind of tool set. So yeah, Play Canvas is definitely something you could check out.
Play Canvas, right? All right. Well, it's getting to about 7:40 our time here in the UK. I really think it's great, and it's absolutely it's been an advantage of running this online that we've had people dialing in from many places. I've seen people coming in from Brazil and Romania and other places around the world. That's fantastic. So it really shows that there's an advantage to running things online like this. Once again, I'd just like to say thanks to everybody for joining us. Laura, did you want to say anything else? Final last words?
No, besides thanks, and stay healthy and safe at home. Please let us know feedback. We want to know, what are you building? What are you trying to build? What would you like to see in the process to publish your PWA into the Galaxy Store? what's the difference that you're experiencing into different browsers. Everything that is related with your experience as a developer, or which other topics you're interested is more than welcome.
Thank you, Laura. And yeah, can I just add my good health wishes to everybody on the call. Thanks for everybody for joining us. I think we're gonna close it off, and I'm gonna stop the recording now.